Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Dion Wiggins. I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders of Omniscien Technologies. I'm joined today by Professor Philip Kuhn, and we also have a guest speaker that I'll be introducing shortly. Philip is our chief scientist, and he'll be walking through some of the more technical content. Today we have quite a packed presentation. We have an industry update, which is normal for our kind of presentations. We have a roadmap section, some product improvement announcements. We have our guest speaker, Sven Gronemeyer from UFA, and we have a product launch for two new products, Business AI and Translation Quality Solutions, as well as a whole range of product demos that we'll be showing, and at the end, Q&A. Because it's such a large amount of content, the total presentation time is scheduled for 90 minutes with about 65 or 70 minutes presentation and another 20 minutes or so Q&A. Okay, so if you have any questions, please drop them into the chat, and we can talk about the questions at the end and go through those, and you can ask questions to either myself, Philip, or any of the other people in the team, as well as Sven, of course. Okay, so let's kick things off. So AI is everywhere, and it's a little bit overhyped. So you might have seen The Wolf of Wall Street. Well, of course, it starts with sell me this pen, right? And the easy answer today is it's AI powered, because that's what every company is putting the label of AI on, pretty much everything. Overall, AI is great, but it has its limitations, and it's certainly not everything it's cracked up to be. So this presentation is going to take quite a realistic approach, and it's also going to address some of the many issues that companies are facing. Now, this is one of the greatest quotes of all time in my books. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So that was Arthur C. Clarke. And that's certainly where we are today with generative AI and many of the other variants of artificial intelligence. But there is a lot of actual advanced tools, but they're just not being applied correctly. So as we go forward, you'll see, a lot of questioning. People have had the AI honeymoon. So is AI really delivering? That's one of the big questions now, right? Is it really there? Is it turning things on? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? Okay, so obviously that's a challenge, and we need to make sure that AI can deliver for everyone in the business going forward. Now, one of the challenges, of course, is CEOs are really hyped. The whole C-suite's really hyped. But we're seeing more and more of these newspaper articles where CEOs are pushing too hard. AI is increasing workload. Executives are expecting too much of their employees. AI in the workplace kind of sucks, right? There's a disconnect between adoption and generative AI. Lots and lots of these messages everywhere. Okay, and to be fair, they're quite valid. AI has been really thrust upon us very, very quickly, and it's meant rapid changes. Are the expectations too high? Well, if you look at one of the polls recently, and there's many similar polls, this one's from Upwork Research, 96% of executives believe that AI will boost productivity, but only 65% of employees agree. Another 77% of employees actually think that AI has added to their workflow because they have to learn it, new tools, they're spending extra time reviewing content. Executives think that, the workforce is ready for AI, it's skilled. Only 17% of employees think so. 38% of employees are overwhelmed. 39% of companies have mandates to use AI tools. 46% are encouraging their use. So combined, that's 85% of these companies are really pushing AI. That's a lot of push, right? But it is to be expected, because AI, when it's used right, has the potential to be a game changer. So that push often comes from expectations that employees will be able to get more done. Sometimes that's not reality. Okay, 65% of employees feel like they can't keep up with their boss's demands. That is a huge number of employees that are disillusioned. Now, why is that? Well, the bosses aren't hands-on, they just read the hype. And there is a lot of hype, and it's pretty extreme. Okay, so today we're going to be launching a number of tools, and some of these tools are specifically designed and focused on solving business tasks every day for regular employees, as well as the more advanced tasks of corporate workflows and things like that. So we're launching a whole series, hundreds of templates that are pre-built, predefined, that you can adapt. They're designed for board meetings, sales calls, job interviews, meeting summaries, document analysis. They are not generic solutions. They are very focused and deep solutions. And we now have a dedicated team that is full-time doing nothing but building these templates for different industries. Now, we have a visual builder. You can clone them, and then you can do things like analyze my documents, analyze my meetings, answer my form. So imagine having an RFP and having your RFP analyzed and answered for you, and then you just check the answers. Ask my documents, build my chatbot, and write my content. Now, we'll be going through these in more detail later. This is just a little bit of a teaser for what's coming later in the presentation. We're also launching today our translation and speech quality solutions. These include a bunch of four-letter acronyms: TAPE, SAPE, TACA, and SACA. Okay, these are all translation automated post-editing, translation quality analysis, and similar things for speech. With our case study with UFA today, we'll be looking at how these are actually used in the real world with a real world case study that's actually publishing thousands of hours of content direct to YouTube straight from original video content. Excuse me. So let's start with just sort of looking at where some of the tools are and looking at the industry. So the reality is, for a while now, we can no longer believe our eyes or our ears in terms of what we see or what we hear. This is a real friend of mine. I just spotted his photos the other day on Facebook, and I thought, wow, that'd be really good to use in a presentation. So Scott lives in Australia. He's a regular guy, loves his kids. He does weightlifting. He's a professional competitive bodybuilder as a hobby. He rides motorbikes, and he uses Facebook to share photos with family and friends. Just a regular guy. Now, this is really Scott. This is not fake. So he does competitive bodybuilding. Now, Scott's in his 50s, and he looks pretty fit. Okay, that's real Scott. Now, the photo on the left is also real Scott, but the photo on the right is AI Scott. So we've beefed him up a bit, gave him a bit more muscle tone and so on, made him a little bit browner, right? Adjusted the paint job, so to speak. But the left is fake and the right is real. But Scott's got a secret. He's got quite a big secret. He's also into competitive boxing and fighting. He's a skydiver. He's into canoe racing. He was in one of the wars. Actually, he was in quite a few of the wars, going back even to World War II. He hasn't aged a bit. He was even a samurai. He was back in Napoleon times and English times, fighting wars. Going back even further, he was a knight. He was an Egyptian, right? Why? Because Scott wanted to be king. Now, obviously, all of these images are fake. But the quality that an amateur today can produce, let alone with the professional tools, really shows how far these tools have come. Now, these are pretty basic images, and Scott was producing these and sharing them to family and friends on Facebook. I just borrowed them off his Facebook page. Now, that's the level that we're getting to. So I'm going to hand over now to Philip. And Philip's going to take you through some of the latest, more technical advances in language models and machine translation.
Yeah, so I basically want to talk about some of the things that are kind of where we are with state of the art. So the first one is on language models and machine translation. So machine translation is a bit of a holdout in having not been completely swept aside by the big language model wave, but I'll give you some updated information today. But before I get into that, it's worth kind of remembering some history. So some of the veterans around you might still remember there was a thing called statistical machine translation, where we broke up the translation problem into two components. One was the translation model and one was the language model. And the language model was really, really important. It was trained on much, much more data and was very important because it ensured fluency. So a translation model gave you some hints which words you should use in your sentence, but it was really up to the language model to figure out how to make that a fluent and consistent sentence. Next slide. But since 2016, the big breakthrough in this field was to move towards neural models. So these are encoder-decoder models, but initially based on recurrent neural networks. And the one thing that stunned me at the beginning, for instance, was that it didn't use a language model. It was just trained on the parallel data, so only trained on the translated text and nothing else. Next slide. So key idea in these recurrent neural network models for machine translation was this attention mechanism that when you translate a word, you should probably pay attention to some words in the input sentence more than others. And that particular model introduced this idea of attention that basically computed which of the input words mattered more than all the others. And then that was then factored in when making the prediction for the next word more strongly than others. Next slide. So the attention idea was then taken on by the transformer model, which also used it for self-attention. So instead of walking through a sequence, the representations of each words were refined by looking at the surrounding words. I mean, think about if you have an ambiguous word like bat, it might be baseball bat, or it might be that flying animal. And if you look around and see words like pitcher and home run, then you know what the meaning of the word is. So there's some words in the context that matter to get a better sense of the word. And that's basically the attention mechanism in the transformer, which was originally developed for machine translation. Next slide. So then the transformer models were also taken on by people who really just cared about language representations. They really wanted to do tasks like sentiment detection, summarization, keyword spotting, information extraction, all these kind of natural language tasks. And they needed to have better representation of the words, because if you just go by words, you don't really get synonyms or nuanced meaning and so on. So the very first models that were trained basically were trained on exactly the same transformer architecture as was used for machine translation. And the big breakthrough then was GPT-2, which claimed that you don't actually need to train these models just to get representation. You can use them directly to do particular tasks. Now, everybody who's used ChatGPT that today thinks that's a very obvious statement. It was not an obvious statement 5 years ago. Next slide. At some point, people who use these transformer models for language model realize it doesn't really make sense to have an encoder and a decoder, so something that processes the input and then completely separately processes the output, because all you do is modeling long sequences. So the latest move is towards encoder-only models. Next slide. So where we are right now is this is actually a slide from last year from how big the models have gotten. The good news is they haven't gotten bigger than this, really. So the biggest models around are hundreds of billions of parameters, which is very, very massive. So for instance, Llama 3.1, the large model that was just released, also has around 400 billion parameters. So it's basically the size of the biggest bubbles here. Next slide. So this is, so we kind of came now full circle. So we used, we're now using language models for machine translation. So instead of starting with machine translation, doing language models, we're now going back to using language models for machine translation. The idea is you first train on lots and lots of monolingual text, and then eventually train on a translated text. So it's almost the same training as for training machine translation models directly. It's almost the same architecture. It's the same training data, the same training set, optimization, evaluation, basically is really indistinguishable. An important advantage of having a really massive model that is trained on trillions of words is it knows much more about language. So one of the key differences, for instance, is that these models tend to be better at document level context. So if you need previous sentences to come up with better ideas about how to disambiguate words, what pronouns refer to, being more consistent in the vocabulary choices you make, that's really helpful. Another key advantage of using language models is that it allows you to give guidance for style and terminology. So you can just translate the sentence, but use, the style of, this company, or use these terminology terms in your translation. And another way to do this is to provide examples of similar translations. So you can basically revive this old fuzzy match idea of giving similar examples and then guide the translation that way. Next slide. So these are now brand new results, partially unpublished. So this is the WMT 2024 results. So this is a competition that happened over the summer, where it's mainly intended for researchers to develop new machine translation technologies and then see which one works best. But this time around, we also ran the kind of big MT models, and we also ran the big language models and see which worked out best. And so this is kind of the early results where we showed on automatic metrics, large language models performed much better than machine translation models. So the best model here, according to the automatic metric, was Tower large language model that was specifically tuned for machine translation, and this outperformed everything else. I have to say that we are now getting the human evaluation comes in, and there the pictures are a little bit more mixed. That still the large language models are doing better than the MT models, but it's different models. So it's also Claude and GPT-4 who are sometimes the best system there. Next slide. Okay, so where are we now then if you actually want to deploy machine translation for your own purposes? So the biggest problem with large language models is that they're very, very costly. They have 10 to 1,000 times as many parameters as dedicated machine translation models. You need much more powerful machines, so you have to start at least with one, if not dozens of GPUs that each cost $20,000. It's also slower because it's so much more computationally expensive. And also, it's much more expensive to adapt these models to particular use cases. So it is really at the point, kind of a really careful cost-benefit analysis that is required to figure out what is really the best technology to use. Okay, I want to move on to a different topic, which is multimodal models. So we talked a lot about text models. Dion already showed image models. And I mean, one interesting thing is that we use very, very similar technologies, both for text and speech and vision. They all use some variants of transformers. So even in speech recognition, there's some version of transformer called conformer that adds a convolution step. So the difference between speech and text is that speech is just much richer if you just look at the audio data. So it has to be condensed much more to get really the meaning out of it. And in vision, there used to be also a long time use of convolution methods, which also, the input image is really, really rich in information, a lot of colors and parts. And you usually want to have just a few, short words of description from it. But even that has moved to transformer models. So even that transformer models are now used to vision. So we use very, very similar technology for very, very different modalities. So one other key step that is happening is that the thing that makes text unique is that every word is kind of a discrete event. The word dog occurs or a dog doesn't occur. There's no ambiguity about it. The words are in the text. While in speech, I mean, everything is more fuzzy. There's a million different ways how to pronounce a word. So it's much more richer, analog, continuous input. But a key step that is currently being pursued is to turn these continuous events, like people pronouncing the letter A in different ways, into kind of discrete events by quantization. Next slide. So this is kind of the process how this happens. So you have, like, for instance, imagine this as each dot as being like one consonant or vowel being pronounced. And then this is the step that kind of turns all these things into like groups and detects that this is the cluster that is corresponding to the letter A. This is the cluster that corresponds to the letter E. So you basically try to get discrete information out of the continuous signal. Next slide. There are actually two different ways how you actually discretize audio signals. So one thing I just kind of alluded to previously, where you try to get the meaning out of it. You want to know which vowel or which consonant is being pronounced, because that really matters for the meaning. But there's also other aspects of the speech signals that might be really useful. The voice of the speaker, the gender of the speaker, the emotional kind of undercurrent of how things are being said. These models are to train these kind of discrete tokens. Quite different models are used. They're mainly trained to kind of reconstruct the audio signal, because if you try to reconstruct the audio signal, you don't only have to reconstruct the meaning, you also have to reconstruct the voice of the speaker and the background noise and everything that comes along with it. Next slide. So here's an example of once you have audio tokens, so now we're talking about semantic audio tokens, and you have text tokens, you can actually build very, very similar technology. So you can basically take a model that is really originally trained for text, so in this case, Palm, which is like a very large language model that was then extended by saying, okay, now we're going to add additional vocabulary. On the vocabulary are these audio tokens, and then we can just keep on tuning. So we have basically a speech understanding model that can act just like, you speak into ChatGPT, and it just builds on a massively pre-trained text model. Next slide. So the key idea here again is that you basically can discretize the speech signal and make it look very, very similar to the text signal. So the text signal is a sequence of words, and now the speech signal is a sequence of these tokens. Next slide. So another thing is when I alluded earlier to, there's the semantic tokens, but there are also the acoustic tokens. So if you want to build a model that takes speech in and speech out, let's say speech translation, where you want to preserve the sound of the speaker, the emotion of the speaker. So there's an interesting model from like a year ago from Seamless, from Meta, who we called it Seamless 4MT, which basically then took these these acoustic tokens and then used them to generate the output speech in the same style as the input speech. Next slide. Interestingly, the same thing is being done for vision, where also the continuous image, which is various patches with like all kinds of colors, is turned into discrete units. Next slide. So, and then that is the kind of a core component of using transformer models for video. So you see here on the top, so we basically have to turn everything to a sequence. It's a bit unnatural to turn an image, which is two-dimensional, into a one-dimensional sequence, but you can see on the top how that happens. You basically just take different patches of the image and kind of break it up into smaller pieces. And then you have like steps which discretize these images and then basically try to get what is the meaning of a particular part of the image. That might be grass or eyes or something like this. And then that is used to kind of generate to have better representation of the model, and then allow you to do all the things you want to do, which is, for instance, synthesizing images. Next slide. So what all this enables you is that you basically have very similar representation of video, speech, and text. And here's an example of an architecture that generated the image that Dion pretty much showed, which is you have some kind of text representation, you have some existing image, and you want to generate something. So you're taking an image of a person, and then you say, make it look like a samurai warrior. So that's your text, you put in the text. And then when it generates the image, it takes both the original image into account and the text into account. And this here is basically then a generation process that again uses the transformer architecture. Okay. So the big trend right now is, and this is still a little bit on the horizon, which is to really have an integrated model that uses speech, language, and vision. So there's definitely a lot of work already on having integrated models that use both text and speech. They can do speech transcription, speech translation, speech understanding, all these things. So the input and output might be speech or text, and you can mix and match in any different ways. Vision is kind of currently being added to it. Vision is a bit different because speech is always a communicative act, and vision is, well, what do you want to get out of the image? What do you want to help to understand what the speaker is saying? So then you need like picture of the face, mouth movements, or is it just completely different information like an image coming in and you want to change the image or what's in the image, then it's not really the same thing as kind of text that is a kind of just a description of something. Yeah, let's move on. So the last thing I want to talk about is where we currently are with language models and support for multiple languages. So the big problem is that large language models currently are still trained predominantly on English text. I think there are two main reasons for it. One is there's just so much more English text available. So if you just take all the text in the world, you're going to end up with, in this case, 90% English. And the other problem is that everybody currently chases the benchmarks because they want to do better than the next guy, and all the benchmarks in English. So there's just so much focus on English performance. And then if there's commercial interest in market your model to other languages, there's maybe a handful of languages that become relevant because they're commercially viable. Next slide. So there are, however, a lot of multilingual challenges. So here's like a list of things I want to go over. One is the access to information across the language barrier. The other one is prevention of harmful generation. So that means toxic content, cultural bias, hallucinations, and then retrieval of relevant information across the language barrier. So this might be used for retrieval augmented generation. Imagine that the content you want to retrieve is in a different language than the query, or you might want to have evidence for the supported generated text. So if the language model generates some text, you want to know why is that true, or just generally matching queries with documents which might be in different languages. Next slide. So here's an example. So if I ask this question about, to be modest, about myself, an welchen Universitäten hat Philipp Köhn studiert, so at which universities did Philipp Köhn study? And I'm asking this Google Gemini and get more or less the right answers. Next slide. But if I ask the same question in Korean and actually don't read the Korean, and the response I got, I just run through Google Translate. So, and it's all wrong. Basically, universities I have nothing to do with. The only university listed here is Edinburgh, but I was a professor there and not a student, and all the dates are completely wrong. So it's mostly false. So we basically asked the same model, the same question, in just two different languages. For one, we got the right answer, and for the other one, we got complete nonsense. Next slide. So this is something we are currently looking very actively on. This is work with a student here at Johns Hopkins, where we basically try to investigate how much does information transmit across languages. So here in this study, kind of made up novel information. We put it in one language and then checked if we query about it in other languages, how well does it transmit? And so the diagonal C on that line is if you kind of put in query in the same language that the information you put in, that information gets retrieved, but it's less the case if you ask about it in different languages, especially low resource languages. Next slide. And yeah, so here's the other big topic. So there's a lot of effort to make the models less harmful. So you avoid toxic language, advice to commit crimes, misinformation, hallucinations, all these things that you don't want a language model to produce. So there's typically like a red teaming approach where people write prompts that elicit harmful responses and then label the responses of the language model and then use this data to train a model that detects stuff that are harmful and then make the model to be less harmful. And the big question is, does this work across languages? And again, we investigated this and found this is not the case, especially not for low resource languages. Okay, and then the last thing is, so this is one of the key techniques is like before you answer it, you're gonna consult some document. This is especially the use case for like a business that wants to use language models for their own documents. You don't expect all these documents already being in the large language model. Hopefully they're not already in the large language model. So then before you answer the question, you retrieve the relevant document, then match a query, and then return the answer. But you might, in this kind of situation, also be in a situation where the query and the document are in different languages, but you still have to find the relevant document. And you still have to figure out how to use that document that is now in a different language in the prompt when you generate the answer. And there's several default methods, like machine translation. You can just translate everything to English and just work on English, or you use things like cross-lingual information retrieval. or some kind of language independent matching step. So this is still a bit unclear how to do this best. Next slide. I think that's it from me.
Okay, so thank you for that, Philip. So we're going to switch back now to a little bit more about Omniscien, and then after that we'll go into some of our product launches, our case study, and but first of all we're going to touch on our roadmap. So in the last year we've had some pretty significant advances. We're now up to around 650 languages for machine translation language pairs. We have 50 plus speech recognition languages, OCR 210, file conversions over 200 for different formats, NLP tools, business AI, we have a whole range of tools I'm going to be showing you shortly, linguistic tools such as sentiment analysis, named entity recognition, workflows, broadcast tools, and of course generative AI. Now, in the next 6 months, we're working very hard on conversational AI tools and getting these up and running where you can have real-time conversations via voice, and it will answer you with voice as well in real time. We're looking at on-premise training for speech recognition, machine translation, and LLMs. So that means even sensitive data can be used to train your models rather than the current state where we've got a lot of engineers working on this. We've now automated a lot of these processes so that we can start handing them off to customers and customers can run them in their own office. Then we've got multi-agent interactions, and these are getting pretty amazing. I did one the other day for speech recognition where if you have the use case, let's say the Olympics, and I want to know all the different athletes' names and all the different commentators' names and load them into my speech recognition as a glossary, I can now just tell it, go out and find me these names and load it into my speech recognition, and 20 minutes later, it's all loaded and ready to go. So I didn't need to even go and do the work. It just went and found all the names for me, added them to my glossary, and now I'm able to recognize names that might not be in everyday English. You know, let's say something like Usain Bolt, for example, is not an everyday English name prior to him becoming an Olympic star. And then multi-agents working together. So I just saw a fascinating case today where people were playing games and they were able to load in hundreds of bots, and the bots started organizing. So these agents started talking with each other, collaborating, and all those kinds of things. And in the end, they turned around and formed communities. And the communities grew vegetables and plants and whatever they needed to survive. They made rules, they made laws, and people abided by the laws. But all these people weren't real. They were all artificial, all agents, and they didn't know that the others were artificial. And they all organized themselves into communities that worked to help each other. It was quite fascinating. Then we have video, audio, and image analysis. And we're starting to work on things like voice biometrics now, facial recognition, sound recognition. So being able to hear an ambulance driving by or a dog barking, those kinds of things. And live video descriptions and object detection. Now, all of these can be used in a wide variety of use cases, every single one of these tools. Okay, so object detection, for example, we can see in real time people riding bicycles, walking. We can see that it's a truck, and this is video. We can also see here's somebody's face, and then we can send that graphic to facial recognition to very quickly work out who it is. But in real time, we're able to say this is a bottle, a vase, etc., etc. Okay, now we're even able to do things like OCR, so we can recognize gazelle off the side of this. Okay, this is a slide that I've presented previously. These tools are almost ready to ship. Okay, we're able to take things like a security camera footage, turn off the radio in the background, isolate individual voices, even though they're all merged into one video channel, and separate them onto their own separate channels. And in this case, the two ladies are arguing over something. They're speaking over top of each other. We're even able to separate those voices onto their separate microphones. Now, this is from a fully merged audio channel, and we're able to do this at broadcast quality. We're also able to do this for different use cases like dubbing. So being able to remove the music, let's say you don't have the rights to the music in a particular country. So we can remove the music or remove the dialogue so that you can now dub in a different language. Now, if you bought the right content, you probably have all the separated content. But if you don't, and it's just in a normal, let's say, stereo feed, you need to do what's called stemming. And you stem an audio element such as drums or piano or wind instruments, guitars, those kinds of things. And we can break those out at broadcast quality. Now that saves tens of thousands of dollars. When it comes to security and privacy, this is where we excel. So everything in the Language Studio suite can be run 100% on-premise or in your own private cloud. It can even be air-gapped so that you're not even connected to the internet. So we have a lot of government customers that are completely air-gapped from the internet. They never touch it. So, that's a big advantage. But the other reason is a lot of companies are looking at data security, accidental leakage, those kinds of things. So somebody copies something into Google Translate or ChatGPT. If you read the fine print, they now own your data. You've just given them your IP. Okay, so be very careful. Now, as I mentioned, we're moving to not just private data processing, but private model customization. So we're preparing the tools now to ship in January or February timeframe, where you'll be able to do training in your own office without ever having to share content with any third party. Okay, so let's look at our product updates now. There's a couple of very exciting updates. One of our most important ones is speech recognition. So I'll be going through these in a bit more detail. We have monitored processing, document and image classification, multilingual document translation, and a range of just general UI improvements in our overall platform. So let's start with speech recognition improvements. So if you look at the quality of our speech recognition, it is right at the forefront. It is beating in terms of word error rate, OpenAI, Microsoft, AWS, Google, right? Substantially better. And with customized models, even better still. These are out-of-the-box, off-the-shelf metrics, okay? So these can be hosted in your premises, in private cloud, or we can host it for you. We support 50+ languages, and more are being added. We can do custom glossaries, as I mentioned before, and we have a range of glossary creation tools. Now, in our latest updates, across the board, there is an average of 18% word error rate improvements, but some languages, the improvements are even more substantial. So Vietnamese was a 63% improvement. Arabic was a 48% improvement, and Polish a 39% improvement. Not only that, our latency is now as low as 500 milliseconds. Okay, so less than 1 second. Okay, that is substantial for real-time transcription. We've also done significant improvement to the Arabic language pack. So we now support other Arabic dialects such as Egyptian Arabic, and we have some new languages, Irish, Maltese, and Singlish. If you're not familiar with Singlish, that's Singapore English. It's a mixed bag of grammar, Tamil, Hindi, Malay, Chinese, and English all thrown together. It's a rather interesting version of English. Okay, so these are substantial, and these are available today. Next is multilingual document translation. So being able to take documents in multiple languages within a single document, analyze them, separate the content by language, and then translate it. And this makes a huge difference. Okay, here's a really interesting one. This is an email that's provided to lawyers around the world, and it's in about 45 languages in a single email. It's announcements from governments each day on government policy, but it's not translated. So we can take the entire email and we can convert it to English or another language in one go and present you with a translated email in the language of your choice, taking all 45 languages. Okay, now monitored processing is a big part of one of the key elements of the new Business AI suite, but it can be used for many other things other than Business AI. So we presented this a little while ago, but we're releasing it with this release. Now, here's one example of monitored processing. Let's say you set up an email account called accounts@mydomain.com, and you get invoices from around the world in French, German, Chinese, etc. So we check the mailbox periodically. We detect the language. We translate it to our preferred language. In this case, it's English. Then we analyze the document and we check that it's a purchase order. If it is a purchase order, then we match it to the purchase order database, and we update the database, and then we share information automatically with the finance and accounts team. Excuse me, I'm just getting over the tail end of a flu, so excuse me for the odd cough here and there. Now you can see that's a relatively simple but extremely powerful process. Now that's actually a process done with a visual workflow where we just drew it and it became real, no code. And I'll be showing you that tool shortly. Next, we have monitored processing again, but for a different use case. Now, I just got an email a couple of hours ago in Arabic. Okay, now it was one of our Middle Eastern customers. I simply forwarded it to a preset email address called translate2english@mydomain.com, and I was on my Android phone. I didn't even have any special software. 1 minute later, it came back to me, translated from Arabic into English, including all the attachments. And that's without any UI, just forward it to an email address, and you can set up email addresses for different languages. So translate to French, translate to Chinese, translate to whatever you want. Just forward it to the right mailing address, and it will do an auto response and come back in the language of your choice. Okay, now let's take it to the next stage. We're talking about folders. Now, when I say folder, I'm not just meaning something on your network. We have full support for Dropbox, WeTransfer, Google Drive, AWS S3, OneDrive, and a whole range of other storage mechanisms. So it can monitor folders for files, it can check it on a schedule, it can classify the document, and then run whatever workflow you want it to do. So it could be similar to what I just showed you, it could be translating, analyzing, and so on. Now, some of you may not know what a classifier is. I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to give you a quick example of how classifiers work in Language Studio. So let's say I have a bunch of documents, and I don't know what they are. They might just be archives, they could be anything, or it could just be a document sent to an email. So we have an AI classifier, and we can detect, oh, this document is a purchase order. This document's an invoice, this document's a contract. Okay, but what if we have another case here? The other case is images. So we have an image, we need to detect what is in the image. Is it a bunch of photographs of scenery? Great, we can do object detection and other things on it. Is it a scan of a document? Or is it a mixture? Maybe it's a brochure, for example. Okay, so we can decide how to process that. Okay, so I'm just going to jump out to my browser now, and I'm just going to go across here, and we'll log into Language Studio, and I'm just going to go to classifiers and show you how easy it is to do classifiers. Okay, so let's just pick business documents. This is one I set up already. I haven't fully populated it yet, but here you'll see a bunch of categories. Now, I've set up these categories. Now, there's nothing special about these categories. They're just a list. So here I can add and remove categories. So if I want to add a new one, I can just say, okay, I want to put birth certificates. Here's a description. Okay, and away we go. That's it. That's simple. It's just a way to say, when this comes out, I want this kind of document labeled as a contract or corporate bylaws. Then what you do is you drag and drop a bunch of samples, and you say process. Once you say process, it'll take a few minutes. It's analyzing the documents. It can be PowerPoint, PDF, Word, images, you name it, all sorts of formats. It will then analyze it, and from that point forward, it will recognize similar documents as an annual budget or an annual report. So you can just set up your categories, drag and drop samples, and go. It doesn't get much easier than that. Okay, so there's multiple classifiers supported. Okay, so here we can just create a classification. Different kinds of meetings. So here we've just got 2, Scrum and Town Hall. It could be media workflows with all sorts of different classifications. Now you can see how many have been uploaded, nothing at the moment, but you just drag and drop, set them up. We will be pre-training some of these to set you off, but then of course you want to fine tune it. So you can add your own documents to it. And this all happens in your own office. You don't need to have us to train it. You simply click and go. Okay, so that's a classifier. Really, really easy. Okay, so let's take what I just showed you and apply it to digital forensics. Okay, so here we have a whole hard drive, not just a folder, but an entire hard drive. Okay, now our use case here is a government tax and customs department, and they have gone to a business with a search warrant, and they've already got a search warrant to confiscate property and to capture information about fraud. They believe this company is engaging in fraudulent activity, and so they're going to analyze the hard drive. The very first thing we'll do is we'll do an inventory. We expand and unzip compressed files like zips and PST mail archives, things like that, and we run a quick language ID over it. Then you have prioritization. So obviously a hard drive has a lot of content. You want to focus on what's most valuable first so you can start using it first. So we can do image classification, OCR, converting documents, object detection, detailed language ID in case there's multiple languages in a document, audio language ID for both recordings of video and audio, speech recognition and transcription, translation, document classification and detail, extraction of basic metadata, okay, maybe some very simple summaries for some of the documents. Then we can do more advanced custom analysis. So very deep custom analysis and extraction, metadata extraction, cross-referencing, all those kinds of things. Now, why would we do all of this? Because once it's done, you can start to do things like this. Ask it questions. Show me all email messages that discuss financial matters, tax planning, and tax avoidance strategies. So it will bring those emails out. What about this one, though? This is one of my most, in my eyes, one of the most impressive use cases. I'm a customs department, so I have a customs database with customs declaration forms. Now, I have all the forms that this company submitted, so I can search the entire hard drive for the serial numbers of those forms. Now, once I find those documents, I can analyze all the documents as a starting point. Now I can link to other documents and I can build a story. So here's a story where the customer or the user has submitted a customs declaration form. I've gone back and I found product information, okay, through perhaps their email. I can then look at their browser history, and I found that, yes, they've been to this company's website and they've placed an order. I can see an email exchange with the company making inquiries, and I can see the third-party company saying, would you like me to send you a second invoice for a lower amount? And now I have a story about that invoice, and I can replay that story. That's the level of analysis we're able to get to with these workflows. And this is what Business AI is offering. Okay, let's look at some of the analysis that can be done. So this is a real case that was presented to us a little while ago. And as a Kiwi from New Zealand, you know, this is close to my heart in terms of vernacular. I surfed a little bit as a kid, but this is very thick Australian surfer vernacular. So it was from a subtitle, and you can see the content here, and here's the detailed sentences. Now, as a native English speaker, I cannot understand this. I really can't. I could probably guess at some of it, but really it's too weird, too unusual, and too specific vernacular. But let's go and break it down with AI. Now that's just 6 subtitles. Let's see what it sees. First of all, it's 2 people, likely male, familiar with each other and sharing a casual conversation. It's at a beach or a coastal setting, possibly after a surfing session. The scene is likely Australia, the UK, or New Zealand, where surfing is popular and the dialect used is common. The conversation is taking place after a surfing session where one friend is talking about the other's performance. It's casual, light-hearted banter. They're likely in their teens and early 20s. Now, all of that from 6 subtitles. That's already quite impressive in my eyes. Now, let's go a bit further. The tone's informal, playful, it's relaxed, carefree. Surfing and beach culture, so it's breaking down key elements, friendly, use of colloquialisms, humorous references, etc. There's a lot of very deep information here. But what did they say? So here it goes through notable vocabulary. Cheers, mate, is generally a greeting or, a thanks. Cheers, that was awesome. A quickie, it's a slang term for a brief snack, drink, or meal. Now, not to be mistaken for a quickie in another context where perhaps a manager is taking the office receptionist in a stereotypical example to a hotel for a quickie for lunch. So a little bit different. It would depend totally on the context. Proper surf just means, it was a great experience surfing. Clacker is your jaws and mouth blabbing. Right? Gobbler is your Adam's apple. Beef cap is a slang term for head or skull. An anteater is your nose. So now, earlier, most people couldn't have understood or even translated that. Now we go one step further. If I'm translating to German, this is how I translate it, and this is why I translate it that way. Here's the examples all the way down for each term, how I translate it, and why this was chosen. So here, beef cap, etc., all the way down, and it explains it. Okay, that's just from these 6 sentences here, 6 subtitles. Look how much information is there. And that's the kind of thing that can be done across an entire hard drive or an entire movie if you're processing media, okay, or an entire transcript if we're doing a webinar or a meeting for sales, things like that. This is the kind of analysis that can be done. Okay, so we're going to move on to our case study now. And shortly I'll be introducing you to Sven, and Sven will give you a bit of an introduction about his company, UFA, and their recent experience with our tools. So UFA has actually just achieved a world first with us. Okay, what they're doing is without a human in the loop, with only one exception, we're able to go from a German video all the way to distribution on YouTube with no human anywhere. Okay, so let's walk through this. So UFA uploads files into a folder, and these folders can be in several locations such as Dropbox or Azure. We're monitoring those folders. Okay, the very first thing it does is it transcribes. Now, it's using a speech recognition engine that has been customized specifically for UFA. And UFA, in this case, is taking about 25 years, I believe it is, of German soaps. So it's love, romance, conflict, drama, okay, that kind of content. And we customized it to understand that content in depth. Now we customize it to understand the vocabulary and to understand all the things around it. Okay, we also added all the typical terminology, and of course we added all the cast members. Now, over 20 or 25 years, they had quite a few cast members, and they changed over time, and it adapted. Then we did speech automated post-editing, and this analyzes the speech output, and it's looking for bad speech recognition, mishears, all that kind of thing. Now, I want to be clear what bad speech recognition is. It's not always the fault of the tool. And as Sven might mention in his part, their content is old. It has new content and old content. So some of the content's 20, 25 years old. So you can imagine how bad some of the audio is from 25-year-old television. It's very dull. Or it could be that they're in a nightclub or on a noisy train or something like that. Okay, so often even a human cannot hear what's being said properly. So we try and guess sometimes some of the words, we try and repair some of the mishears, and we move forward. Once we've done that, we move to quality control. Now, this is automated quality analysis, and we're analyzing how confident the AI was in the quality of the output. And if it's below a certain threshold, this is the exception where a human gets involved. Now, as I said, sometimes a human cannot even hear, and so we can't expect a machine to hear either. Now, with one exception there, and we just had a chat with Sven yesterday on this with his team, we may in future, for example, decide, okay, we had some trouble with this one. Let's now go and process it through the stem processing and remove background noises so we've just got voices. That may improve the speech recognition. Then we send it to a custom translation engine that's been customized specifically for German soaps and specifically for their shows. And again, we do quality improvements through translation automated post-editing, and then we do translated automation quality analysis, and we have the same thing. Now, of course, if you have bad speech recognition, you're likely to have bad translation, or at least weird translation. Then we generate things like director scripts, subtitles in German and English. And then as a last step, we publish that and distribute that direct to YouTube. Now we can upload just the subtitle if the video is already there, or we can upload the video as well. So we can do the actual last step of distribution on behalf of UFA as well. Okay, so this is a screenshot of some of the data that is produced. And you can see the timing, the speaker, okay, you can see what they said, and over here you've got confidence analysis, and this is a breakdown using various scoring methodologies. Now, the workflow on the UFA side is able to check these scores, or more specifically, a roll-up of these scores. Okay, so here we have the roll-up of the scores, where 100% is all the content, and we look at it from two ways, by subtitle segment and by tokens. And we're still fine-tuning this exact number that raises the red flag that says human step in. But here we can say if it's above this level, then a human should check it. If it's below this level, then we're pretty good. And what this means is, you know, it's a confidence score. It's not a bad score. So it may be low confidence because you had a lot of noise, but it's still got the right word. But how much is low confidence means go have a look at it. Okay, so I'm going to pass the reins over in a moment to Sven. Sven is from UFA, and at UFA he manages a wide range of tasks, and he's been working with us for some time. He's the head of business affairs and business development. And Sven, if you can turn your camera on, and we'll jump over to you.
Thank you, Dion and Philip, for having me, and hello, everyone. And first of all, thanks a lot for the great presentation. I'm still overwhelmed by the insights you gave and the possibilities you describe. Unfortunately, you already told a lot of the exciting stuff, so I can only add, why do all this fuss, and why using all these tools to well, which is my business challenge I hope to address and especially solve with Dion's help. For the past 15 years, I work at UFA Serial Drama, responsible for, well, business affairs it's called here, but it's more or less distribution of our rights and marketing the rights and business development. UFA Serial Drama is a TV production company which is part of the larger UFA Group, one of Germany's biggest TV production companies, and we specialize in producing daily series like soaps and telenovelas. And we've had great success with long-running series, not only 25 years. For example, Good Times, Bad Times, which is the series, the daily we produce, is the first and still most successful daily soap in Germany, and it's been running for 32 years. So we started in 1992 with producing every day a half-hour episode, and now it's 8,000 half-hour episodes. Across all our other series, we still produce, or we have produced, we are talking about more than 20,000 TV episodes, or about 15,000 hours of TV content. Well, that sounds like a great treasure and easy to monetize. Well, it is a treasure, that's for sure, but there's a catch. We don't own the most valuable rights, the German rights. We license them to the broadcaster. We only hold the distribution rights for the rest of the world, excluding German-speaking Europe. And that means without proper localization or some kind of localization, it is impossible to address this huge audience. Traditionally, localization like subtitling used to cost at least 3 figures per half-hour episode, something like that, if you had a good deal. But with niche content like a German daily soap, this makes it German daily soap for foreign countries. This makes it incredibly hard to run a profit in foreign markets. That's the reason why I was looking since a decade for a possibility to, well, more or less reduce the involvement of a human in the loop, of the human actually, because if there's a human involved in any step of this workflow, you cannot stay with the one figure digit, because that is what I calculated the only possibility to have a sustainable business. So in short, unless I can drastically cut the cost of localization and reduce the human involvement to something like Dion mentioned, just partly every 100 episode, there's somebody who has to look into it. So without this reduction, so that the cost will be reduced to a single-digit figure per episode, I won't be able to monetize all this content. And my boss will keep asking when we can delete the archive, because currently the archive just costs money and doesn't earn anything, despite the fact that I believe in earning a lot with it. And now coming to the quality thing, because years ago, Microsoft promised with cognitive service a great success. There is the huge Google machine that translate everything automatically, or transcribe it automatically and then translate it. But so far the quality wasn't good enough, because if you have 80% there and 80% afterwards in the second step, you only have a 60% quality of a subtitle, and that was always not good enough in my idea of being able to distribute it under the name of UFA. So now we, like Dion mentioned, we have such a high quality by a total automated workflow, so that I'm looking forward to first have the first episodes fully automatically uploaded to YouTube. So I kept me brief so we could continue.
Okay, thanks, Sven. So I just want to stress a couple of points. So one of the key things that we worked with UFA to build this from ground up. It's taken us a while. It was tools that we were already working on, but it was great to have Sven and his team as partners in building this out, because we had real data. It took us a little longer in a few cases to solve some of the challenges, and we came up with a lot of very innovative solutions. But one might be forgiven for thinking, oh, we're taking humans out of the loop, therefore we're taking human jobs. But I think, Sven, you'll agree that this wouldn't have been done with humans. It just wouldn't be viable.
Not at all. It is something. In my case, it's really something additionally. It was never my intention not to work with a human, but with a human, the work would be too costly to build a business on it. So it wouldn't have happened.
Right, great. So, that's where a lot of these tools are heading. It's not just helping humans do things faster. It's not necessarily replacing humans, but in many use cases, including this one from UFA, it's about delivering different content that just wouldn't have been viable with humans at all.
Exactly.
Okay, so thank you for that, Sven. I greatly appreciate you contributing your thoughts, and we'll carry on to the next steps and dig a little bit deeper. Okay, so let's take that concept and we'll go a little bit further. So last year we worked with a company that unfortunately ran out of funding, but they had the task of digitizing the national archives of a country. Now, it's not all that different to what Sven was just talking about. You're taking older videos that may be a little bit lower quality along with newer ones, and you're processing them. But we had a whole range of other tasks that we needed to do. So this is the workflow that we came up for that company, where it was dealing with digital documents, photos, just regular document files that are already digital, audio, and so on. So we were going through, we were looking at colorizing, improving and repairing video by calling out from our system into some of the Adobe tools and some other third parties. We're not locked into our own tools. Analyzing things like scene changes and a whole range of others. Automated facial recognition, object detection we talked about already, content type classification, genre, all that sort of thing. And you can see all the steps here. And then this feeds into a MAM database system that can then be retrieved. Now, of course, with the tools now, you can start asking questions and retrieve content based on a whole variety of things. So this is just one example. Okay, so let's move on to Business AI, because this is one of the big announcements we're making today. Okay, so Business AI is a very special set of tools. Okay, it's designed for regular people, not for techies, not for geeks, but for business. We have templates, and you're able to tailor these templates, customize them, and adapt them. Now, today we're doing the soft launch of Business AI with a full launch about the same time next month. Okay, so we're still putting the finishing touches on some of the templates, some of the documentation, but we're able to demo it with you today. So at the end of this presentation, you'll be able to get a URL where you can sign up for the waiting list. We'll give you a trial in the next week or two if you want to play with it, and we can show you the kinds of things that it can do. But today I'm going to give you a live demo anyway, okay? And we'll go through here. Now, let's take meetings as an example. What is a meeting? Well, I can think of about 1,000 different kinds of meetings. Everything from design review meetings, a Scrum meeting for software development, incident review, client sales meeting, brainstorming, employee onboarding, you name it, product launch, all sorts of things. So if I have a meeting, I need to analyze it properly. Right now, I'm on Microsoft Teams right now presenting this, and Teams will do a nice summary for me. But there's a problem with that. Okay, it's a Me Too summary. It's the same kind of summary that Zoom will do, and it's the same kind of summary that if you open the Adobe PDF viewer, you'll get a generic Me Too summary of a document. That just doesn't cut it. So for a sales call, you'll get a generic summary, a generic analysis, right? That's not great. For a webinar, for a board meeting, all of these kinds of things, okay? It's not great. It's generic fluff. It's trying to use AI, but not really. It gives me a poor summary that is way worse than what my human assistant would do if I asked them to. Now, let's look at the kinds of things we could do on a sales call. This is from transcript alone, okay? Now, obviously, we're feeding some additional data on the side to give it more context, but send a thank you email to the customer, okay? And in that email, say, thanks for your time today. You know, it was a very valuable exercise. You know, we enjoyed the conversation. You know, I hope you got the details and the information you want. Here's the next meeting. Here's the detail. Internal discussion analysis, okay? Follow-up email, an action plan. These are the beginnings. Now, I'm just going to drag over some artificial ones that are fake, but they were off a real transcript, and they're ugly. But they're ugly because I decided to make them orange. These are based on templates. So here's an analysis of Technova. It's a meeting that we had lasted an hour and 24 minutes. Okay, core services that we offered them, the contact people, okay, the sales team that was involved, okay, the executive summary, key outcomes of the meeting, customer concerns, what were they concerned and worried about? Okay, sales stage, more analysis. Okay, summary report, business needs that the customer said, their readiness, sales opportunities identified, the challenges that were faced, all sorts of other content. right? Supporting factors, their buying likelihood, speaker analysis, and time allocations that were applied. Okay, that's all from the description and maybe a few side documents such as my products that I'm offering. Okay, that it could pull out the information. Okay, now here's another example of content that came out of that same meeting. Here's a brief proposal. Okay, key points, next steps, let's go. Right, so here's the email, right, and quick summary. We've already scheduled a meeting. It's called out to Microsoft Office 365 and it's booked the meeting and sent you the invite. No human doing this. You can check it and send it. Okay, but I listed 4 things here. Why stop at 4? Proposal draft, sales meeting reports, detailed meeting minutes with a distribution list, and then saving it to a shared folder or filing it in the CRM like Salesforce. Client request summaries, objection handling, how we should handle them when we go back. They raised objections, here's how we handle them, here's how we answer them. Next meeting invitation, okay, adjusting the sales forecast automatically. CRM updates all the way through. And that's just from one meeting type. These are the kinds of things you can do, and these are the things that we're building templates for that you can either use out of the box or very quickly just adapt. Okay, so let's have a look at the meeting process. So you record the meeting. You might add some pre-meeting info such as the agenda, maybe some files such as your product catalog, and the MP4. We will transcribe and diarize. Diarize means to determine who the speaker is for each part. We have the transcription. We'll clean the transcription, which is quite important, and I'll show you that. We then roll through and we do pre-meeting analysis. So if this was a series of meetings, we can go back to the previous meeting and analyze some of the items there. What were the action items? Okay, from this meeting, here's the updates to those action items. Okay, analyze the current transcript. Okay, it's not just one prompt, of course, it's many. Okay, match and merge the information, and then merge that into a template that we've built or set of templates. And then finally output the various notes and update a database or data store. Okay, so it's a pretty big process. Okay, here's a sample document template. Now we can say meeting name, type, location, here's the attendees, and you build this template. Now this is a really complex template. It's got a lot packed into it. You might not want something as advanced, it's up to you. Okay, here's the result of that exact template. So we can see the detail of the meeting, a very short summary, who attended, who should have attended or declined, all based on Office 365 calendar, the previous meeting's agenda summary, this meeting's agenda based on the email that was sent out to invite people. Okay, then each section on the agenda broken down with links to the relevant documents, discussion points, issues and concerns raised, action items, who's the owner and what's the timeline, previous meetings action items, okay, and when were the updates or what are the updates? Then we can even analyze for things like terminology. So in the meeting, we talked about a POC. This is what it means in context. A SIM was a security information and event management, not a SIM card for your phone. And we even talked about snake oil, one of the slang terms. Okay, so it's able to go through and build a glossary and add that to the end of the content. Okay, all of this without a human. Now, you can put human checks at any point in the workflow that you wish to. Okay, let's look at one more step and then we'll go into a quick demo. So here we have human resources. Now, imagine receiving resumes. So you have jobs@mycompany.com. Okay, it automatically detects the language. It'll translate it. Then it classifies the document. Maybe there's several formats, and it will transform those documents into a generic one page that has the exact information I'm looking for. It'll also create data in a database. It'll also create an Excel spreadsheet with the appropriate columns and rows. So one column per applicant with 100 columns going across where it compares all their details side by side. It can also highlight things that are good, highlight things where perhaps they're deficient based on your requirements, and bring it all together. Okay, so here's all your non-standard documents, and it just goes straight in. Okay, now I'm going to come back to translation in a little bit. I'm going to jump now over to a demo, and we're going to go into Language Studio, and I'll give you a live demo of this. Okay, so I'm just going to open a brand new session. Okay, so if I go to log in here, okay, so here's my landing, and you can see I've got a whole range of tools. Now, everything you see here is behind the firewall. Okay, so I can start saying, tell me about Omniscien Technologies. Ooh, can't even spell my company name right. Okay, and it will tell us about it. Okay, I can say translate to Chinese. Okay, that simple, that quick. Okay, and I can do a whole range of things here, just a quick one. Or I can go to the full generative AI chat experience, which is very similar to ChatGPT, where you have all those kinds of options. I can do quick translate, I can do quick conversion, and I can see the jobs that are running now or have recently run, and I can jump to them. So I converted a file, I did quality metrics, these kinds of things. But let's go over to business AI. Now, earlier I mentioned analyze my meeting. Okay, here we go. Here's all the different meeting types with pre-built templates. So you simply upload your file and go. Now we're still filling out some of these, and we're still waiting for some of the graphics to arrive from the graphics designer. So you can see there's a couple that have ugly graphics. Ignore those for now, but you can see there's literally a huge number of these templates, and we're adding more and more all the time. Okay, now I'll show you how these are built shortly. But before that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to Ask My Documents. Okay, now Ask My Documents is a really cool little feature. Okay, so I'm going to go here about an AI and behavioral science document set that I just uploaded earlier. Now, I can go here and I can upload one, I can upload 100 or 1,000 documents. Okay, if I jump over here, I can go to the document viewer, it's a PDF. Okay. Now here I can say, what are the key benefits of integrating AI? And it's gone to the document and it's given me the answers. And how do I understand it? I can just jump to where did it get its answer from? So just jump straight into the document. Now, if I had 10 documents, it would open the correct document and jump to the right place. But, I can say, can you explain behavioral JV? Let me just copy that. I'm terrible at typing. Behavioral science at the reading level of an 8-year-old. Okay, so I'm going to simplify it down. And here we go. It's analyzing that and it's breaking it out. And again, I can go and jump into the different parts and get the information that I need. Where did it come from? Okay, and again, I can do things, translate it to another language. I can even ask questions in another language. Now, one of the things that people have done using ChatGPT that I find personally annoying is having to copy, paste, right? So over here, we have a thing called saves. Now, right now, I have no data here, but let's say I like this particular answer. I can go here and I'll set a tag up that says BSci. Okay, that's my tag. Okay, and I'll just say save that one. Now, if I go over to saves, you can see it's saved that particular element. Now, if I go to my second one, and I'll save that too, and I'll save that here. Okay, I now have 2 of them. Now, I'll ask another question. What is AI? Okay, and I can run it through chat, or I can run it through Flow. Okay, Murphy's Law of Demos, it's not going to work for me. Go back to chat. Okay, oh, because I'm over here. Okay, that's fine. So what is AI? So it's going to give me an answer. Okay, now when that's done, I'll save that. Okay, now I can go over here, and these all have the same tag, but I can filter by tag. I can filter by keywords in my notes, but I can now say, right, I like that answer, and I like that answer. Let's ask questions about that only. And when I'm done, I can then export. So I can group things by different categories. Okay, now, obviously you don't want to upload documents every time if you're going to reuse them. So you have what's called document groups. And here's my document groups, and right now here's how many files I have in each. And I can upload documents at any time into these groups. Okay, and I can just keep them. I can ask more questions. It's great for research, totally private. You can even download URLs or entire websites. Okay, let's go back to some of the business AI categories. Okay, so analyze my documents. So again, we're waiting for the graphics to arrive. These will be loaded in the next few days. They all arrive today. And I can say, right, here's all sorts of different document types. And they're categorized by legal and all sorts of different things. Okay, now go back to the classifier. It comes in, it classifies it as an annual report, and it runs this analysis. Okay, that's what it can do. Okay, if I go over to answer my form, okay, here's a bunch of forms, RFPs, and I can just click in here, upload my RFP, upload my product information, link to my website, and say go. And that's as simple as loading data here, loading similar responses, related documents, and saying analyze and go. Takes a little while. Okay, it'll pull out all the questions. Here's my similar RFPs. It'll adapt the answers to these new questions and apply them. Batch prompt runner is going in and having a whole lot of pre-prepared prompts, and you just say run them, go. Okay, build my chatbot. Let's go to customer service chatbot. So I have a nice screen already set up. I upload content by categories that I want, training and knowledge, product info, etc., etc. I can even say crawl my website, specify the website, it will download the website. Okay, once I'm done, it'll take, depending on how long it takes to crawl the website and process these, maybe it takes an hour or so. At the end of it, I've got 5 lines of code I can copy and paste into any web page anywhere, and I have an immediate chatbot. It's that simple, and I can make hundreds of chatbots. I can make one for HR, one for customer support, one for onboarding, all sorts of things. And we've got pre-built categories for that all over the place. Knowledge base, leads, website chatbot, Zendesk, live person, hooking directly into Zendesk and live person. Okay, so normalizing documents we talked about earlier, writing my content, it's got pre-built templates for press releases, blogs, you name it. And generative AI chat. Okay, now you'll see here, okay, yes. Okay, now I can talk to it if I wish, or I can just do regular chat. Now this is the same as the chat that you saw on the front screen, but I can choose different workflows as well. And I'll come back to workflows shortly. Okay, but here I can do saves, I've got different data sources, and I can go. So I can go, you know, tell me a story about AI and it helping people. Okay, simple example. Okay, just like ChatGPT. Okay, but we can switch to different models. So if you want Llama 3.1, great, I can just switch over. If you want a whole range of different things, and flows do more than just language model, they do workflow. So, this is really powerful. So now I'm going to go down to our workflows because I've talked about flows. Let's actually show you what's in them. Okay, so for starters, I'm just going to pick a generic one here, agenda summary. Okay, and I'm going to go to the basics. So here I have metadata, and this is how I define my tabs. So I can make mini applications just by setting up tabs to upload data and groups into. Now, this is not for your normal user. This is for your power user to set it up for business. Okay, then I have my pages, and I can set up pages with information, drag drop, upload files, click and validation, and I can just go in here and I have a beautiful WYSIWYG editor. I can do HTML, JavaScript, and I can lay it all out how I want. And I can include this in an iframe in my application anywhere. Here's the preview, and if I take away the world here, I can then go to the next step, and next, and next. Here's all the variables that are submitted, and I simply have a very simple, if I go to a date picker, for example, I can say, right, what's the default value, what's the variable name, and then I can just add it onto my form. Okay, so let's go back and go to the workflow. So I'm going to go to agenda summary. This just takes a moment to load. Okay, now on here you'll see a bunch of tools. I'll just delete that one so we have a bit of room. And you'll see a very detailed workflow, and it's doing things like detect audio language, prompt templates, loading a CSV, formatting it as JSON. This is codeless work. Now, here you have things like being able to go to vector stores, and you have all the most common vector stores. You have models like Amazon Bedrock, Anthropic, all the way through, including our own models. You have agents, chains, utilities, search with Google and Bing, all of these kinds of things. Text splitters, okay, toolkits, right? All sorts of bits and pieces. Tools here. Now, of course, if it can't do what you want it to do still, you can go here, click on this one, and put your own Python directly in. Just drop your own Python code into the middle of the flow. Okay, now, of course, it's a Language Studio product, so here's all the Language Studio features. Analyze my documents, so I can analyze my documents as one of my steps. Analyze my meeting, anonymize, answer my form, ask my documents, batch prompt runner, classify, compress, convert, all sorts of tools. Language ID for speech, language ID for text. All you got to do is drag and drop and go. OCR, converting images to text. Part of speech analysis, recapitalization, right? All of these features, stemming, transcribing in batch mode or real time. Okay, all of these features are available. Okay, so huge number of features here. And of course, if you like what you see, but it's not quite right, simply clone it. Okay, just click copy, modify it, and now it's yours. Okay, so just got to wrap up on the last piece. I'm a little bit over time. I apologize for that. It's taking a little bit longer to get this information out. So I'm just going to jump back to the slides now, and I'm very quickly going to touch on translation quality, and we may do another webinar to dive into this in more detail. But here's an example of the content that's coming out, and we've just started engaging with the professional translation tools so that our APIs can be interfaced and even give feedback to the translator. So for example, this sentence is fluent, but this word's a bit strong or too formal. This word's a bit strong, maybe use this word. Okay, and here's the suggested improvement. Now we do a lot more features than this, and I'll show you in just a moment. Okay, we can automatically adjust and refine content. So cultural adaptation, it can or can be done or not. Asians often say in their own languages, can it or can it not be done? Will you or will you not come to my party? And often that carries over into normal language when you translate into another language. So we can change that around. Remove disfluencies like yeah. Sentence joining, split sentences. Okay, adjusting things and making them more fluent overall. Fixing mishears like, I just got a new audio car, and it adapts it to I just got a new Audi. Okay, and combinations of the above and many more. Stylizing, but a new way. We used to do stylizing by making special engines. We can now do this a completely new way, which I'll show you in a moment. Term insertion. So you're translating a really complex document into German. So I've got the German term that none of my engineers actually know. So I can now put the English term back beside it. Okay, that becomes very helpful for technical manuals. Okay, so let's go and jump over to the tools. Okay, and I'll show you exactly how they work. So if I go to translate, and I'm just going to go translate file, you'll see an option here for my process editing tool. And I can say one for Audi, default, it could be Volkswagen, it could be Ferrari, whatever. These are the ones I've set up. Okay, so I'm going to go now to my profiles, and I'm just going to jump into the profiles directly. So here you'll see a profile. Okay, I'm just going to go into edit mode. Okay, now this is just a dummy one I did as an example for the Audi brand. Okay, so here I have contextual proximity or individual sentences. Now this depends what I'm translating. If I'm translating a translation memory that's just lines that have been sorted, then I have no context from the sentences nearby. If I'm translating a document in sequence, I do. So I can do contextual proximity. I can annotate the changes, tell you what I changed and why I changed it, and give that feedback. Okay? I can say it was for Audi or Honda or Ford or Toyota, and it will pick up on that. Just having the brand helps. Automotive guidelines. Okay? The translations, what's their purpose? Okay? The tone. Who am I targeting? Then I can say, right, I want you to perform all of these checks. So accuracy, adequacy, fluency, readability, idiomatic expressions. So going from one language to another, the idiomatic expression might not be good. With UFA, one of theirs the other day that I saw, it said, you know, these two people are like total polar opposites of each other. Now that might be normal in German, perhaps. That was actually said in German, of course. But translating to English, it didn't sound right, especially English as opposed to American English. So it actually adapted it to these two are like chalk and cheese. So it adjusted it. Sometimes there's cultural sensitivities. So we had a customer a few years ago saying, I love your English to Thai subtitle engine, but the profanity is too accurate. So we were able to now tone down any profanity and make it culturally appropriate for that market. We're doing gender agreement, tense agreement, paragraph cohesion, all of these kinds of things. Then we're able to apply glossaries, and it will enforce glossaries that are similar as well. So if you have past tense or future tense for the word, it will adapt to it automatically. Term insertion I showed before, writing style and descriptive rules. So here we have term insertion. Okay, so I can just come in here, I can add my term, okay, and I can say, right, before or after, and set it up, and it's done. Okay, this is my favorite one. Translation writing styles. Very simply, drag and drop content in the writing style that you want for the target language and say go. That's it, you're done. You now have all of that content running through. Okay, you have translation descriptive rules. Okay, so here, this is again a great one. If the brand name Dell appears, then always write it in uppercase. If the family name Dell appears, then write it in case sensitive. Okay, and you can add other simple filters to make it run faster. Okay, you've got similar metrics for translation quality analysis. Now, when you put all of this together, you're able to get some incredibly powerful results. And when you combine that, you're then able to output content. So you might be taking a webinar, for example, and I'm going to drag over a webinar now. This is taken from an actual transcript, but the names have been adapted and the photographs have been adapted. Okay, now this is with one of our partners, Linguistic Systems. So LSI and their product AI Translate. Now here you can see it's analyzed their meeting. Okay, it's got keywords. It's done all the pieces. Okay, it's got the speakers. and it's gone out to LinkedIn, and it's pulled down the speaker's photo. It's also pulled down the speaker's profile. Now, you could also provide that yourselves. It's analyzed the various pieces and put it together. It's got the topic discussions broken out automatically. Okay, key insights and takeaways. Okay, so here's the detail. It's got who spoke in this section. Okay, and it's talking about it. Now it's going to go down. It's going to do the overall summary and a link. Then it's going to go through and it's going to do Q&A. So here's your questions. Here's your answers for everything that was asked on the webinar. And then you've got the detailed transcription. Who spoke? What did they say? And it's going all the way down. Okay, so this is straight out of the box. A human hasn't touched this, other than we just anonymized some of the people because we didn't have everything we needed in terms of profile and things like that, and we didn't have permission to use the real people. Now, you can see this is branded for linguistic systems. It's got their color scheme, and it's a very nice, simple, clean document. Now, after their webinar, this is ready in maybe half an hour to an hour, and they can just upload that straight to the system. Okay, so that's what we're talking about at a high level. I'm going to do another webinar that goes deeper into translation quality solutions, post-editing automatically, refinement automatically, and translation adjustments automatically. Now, the great thing is that applying translation adjustments, this could be automatically translated into French or Chinese with domain. So LSI could have gone to the tools that I showed you earlier and gone translation writing style in French, uploaded a bunch of French documents that are similar, said, right, here we go, adapt to the style. I want it to read like LSI sales and marketing. Okay, we're a little bit over time. I apologize for that. I'm going to switch over now to questions. Okay, we have some nice comments already. So things like, I love the addition of Singlish was one of them. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat right now, and I'll be happy to answer them. A lot of people have dropped out because we ran over time, unfortunately. There's no actual questions yet, although one of the viewers dropped in with a meeting analysis tool, Read AI. I would be happy to compare us against Read AI, apples for apples, and you'll see the difference in our outputs. Okay, we'll be generating a summary from this webinar in the next day or so, and we'll share it online as well, so you can see, like the one from Linguistic Systems, exactly what it looked like. If you'd like a demo, please drop by our website, or you can mail us at sales@omniscien.com. We'll be updating the website tomorrow, and you'll be able to get on our waiting list for when it's released. You'll also be able to book a demo now. We can run you through these tools and a lot more demonstrations. Obviously, it's a very big tool and platform now, and there's too much to show in just a 1.5 hour segment. But obviously, it fits many real-world business use cases from day to day. We don't have any questions at the moment, so I think we'll wrap it up for the day. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop us an email. It's been a pleasure sharing this information with you today, and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinars. And please don't forget, mail any questions you've got to sales@omniscien.com, and you'll hear back from us very quickly. Thank you for your time, and the replay will be available tomorrow. Bye for now.